Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really jumping into the world of Stanley Kubrick.
A huge figure in cinema, visionary, mysterious, maybe even a bit legendary in his methods.
Absolutely. And our goal here, our mission for this deep dive, is to sort of peel back the layers, look past the reputation, and really understand what made his filmmaking tick.
And why these films still grab us, why they still feel so relevant.
From 2001, the immense space journey.
Right, to something as gritty and disturbing as A Clockwork Orange, or even the horror of The Shining.
Yeah, these weren't just movies you watched. They were, well, experiences. They definitely pushed boundaries.
Visually, thematically, they always spark debate. Still do.
Exactly. So the big question we're tackling, I think, is what was really at the core of Kubrick's genius? What were those defining characteristics?
Okay, yeah, let's dig in.
It's quite something, isn't it? That his start wasn't even in film. He was a photographer for Look magazine. Really young, too.
17, yeah. And you have to think that experience working with still images day in, day out, it must have profoundly shaped his visual sense later on.
How so, do you think? What specifically carried over?
Well, look at his compositions. That understanding of how to pack a story and emotion into a single frame, that's photography 101, isn't it? He brought that to cinema. Every shot feels deliberate. The symmetry he's famous for, the lighting, the lines. It's all incredibly precise.
It's not just making it look pretty.
No, not at all. It's visual storytelling, using the frame to enhance the narrative to make you, the viewer, feel a certain way.
And his very first films, like Fear and Desire, which I know he basically tried to bury later.
Yeah, he wasn't proud of that one. But you see the beginnings, the experiments.
But it's maybe The Killing in '56 where you start to see that signature style emerging more clearly.
Oh, definitely. The Killing has that tight suspense, and he's already playing with nonlinear storytelling, which was pretty bold for the time.
Yeah.
But then Paths of Glory in '57, that's where you really see his willingness to tackle uncomfortable truths head on.
The anti-war sentiment is incredibly strong there.
It's brutal. The critique of military hypocrisy, the power structures, it's unflinching. And that really set the tone for the kind of challenging material he'd gravitate towards.
And that boldness, that early vision, it obviously got noticed. Kirk Douglas picked him for Spartacus.
A massive Hollywood epic. Huge opportunity.
But it ended up being a real turning point.
Yeah.
And maybe not entirely in the way you'd expect.
Exactly. Because Spartacus was a big studio machine, lots of cooks in the kitchen, less creative control for the director.
And Kubrick, even then, wanted full control.
Absolutely. He found the process frustrating, restrictive, and that experience, that clash, essentially pushed him to move to England.
And vowed to never lose that creative independence again.
Pretty much. He set up shop there, and from then on, maintained an almost unprecedented level of control over his projects.
So that move to England, securing that independence, it really kicked off an incredible string of films. Let's talk about Lolita first, 1962. Adapting Nabokov. That's walking a tightrope.
A very dangerous tightrope, especially back then. What's interesting is how Kubrick handled it. He sort of sidestepped the most explicit scandal by focusing more on Humbert's psychology.
And the dark comedy of it all.
Yes, exactly. As there's a real vein of unsettling humor. He did say later he felt hampered by censorship, couldn't go as far as he might have wanted. But the focus on that internal turmoil, the atmosphere, it's still very effective, very Kubrickian.
Then just 2 years later, Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah.
Which is just, wow.
Yeah.
How do you even make a comedy about nuclear
You
annihilation?
can make it work so brilliantly. That's the genius, right? It's hilarious, utterly absurd in places.
Peter Sellers playing 3 roles.
Iconic performances. But underneath the satire, it's genuinely terrifying. It taps into that very real Cold War dread, the potential for human error to lead to catastrophe.
It's that blend of tones that's so remarkable. Laughing 1 minute, horrified the next.
A perfect example of how he could mash up genres and moods to create something completely unique and powerful.
And then, 2001, A Space Odyssey. 1968, I mean, what's left to say? It still feels vast and mysterious.
It really does. It operates on a different level than most films. The visuals were revolutionary, obviously.
Unbelievable for the
The
time.
use of music, Strauss and Ligeti, unforgettable. And the story, or lack thereof in a traditional sense, the monolith. It invites endless interpretation.
And his dedication to realism there was extraordinary. talking to NASA scientists.
Obsessive, almost. He wanted the space travel to feel absolutely authentic down to the smallest detail. That level of research was groundbreaking.
And then inventing technology, the slit scan technique for the Stargate sequence.
Right. He didn't just use what was available. If he needed something to achieve his vision, he'd figure out a way to create it.
That says everything about his commitment, doesn't it?
It really does. And to follow that cosmic scale with something as visceral and, frankly, disturbing as A Clockwork Orange in '71.
Talk about a tonal shift.
Huge shift. The ultra-violence, the themes about free will, conditioning, state control. It hit a nerve. Big time.
It was banned in the UK for years, wasn't it?
Yeah.
At his own request, eventually.
Yes. Due to threats and concerns, Malcolm McDowell's performance as Alex is just bone-chilling. The film forces you into some really uncomfortable ethical territory.
Which Kubrick seemed quite comfortable doing. He never shied away from the dark stuff. And then, another pivot, Barry Lyndon in '75. Visually, just stunning.
Oh, absolutely gorgeous. Like watching a series of 18th century paintings come to life.
The compositions are incredible. And the famous candlelight scenes.
Using those special Zeiss lenses developed for NASA to shoot purely by candlelight, it wasn't just a gimmick.
No, it creates this unique, authentic, almost dreamlike atmosphere for the whole film. It contributes so much to the mood.
Exactly. Technical innovation always in service of the artistic vision.
Okay, moving into the '80s, we get The Shining. And this one. It's iconic, hugely popular, but also controversial, especially regarding Stephen King.
Yeah, that's a fascinating case, the author versus director conflict. King famously disliked Kubrick's adaptation, felt it missed the heart of his book.
He felt it was cold, right?
Yes, among other things. But despite King's feelings, the film has just become this massive cultural touchstone in the horror genre.
Jack Nicholson's performance. Here's Johnny.
Unforgettable. But also think about the stories from the set. The pressure, particularly on Shelley Duvall. That infamous scene, 127 takes.
127. It's hard to even imagine.
It speaks volumes about Kubrick's method. Relentless perfectionism, pushing actors to get that exact moment he saw in his head. For better or worse, some would say.
And the imagery is just burned into our brains, isn't it? The Overlook Hotel, the twins, the hedge maze.
Absolutely. It has this potent, lingering power to disturb. And then, after horror, he returned to war with Full Metal Jacket in 1987.
Another unflinching look at the military, this time Vietnam.
And structured so distinctively, too. That first half, the boot camp, it's almost a separate film in itself.
Dominated by R. Lee Ermey.
Oh, completely. His performance as Gunnery Sergeant Hartman is legendary. So intense, brutal, darkly funny at times. It sets up the psychological dehumanization perfectly.
Before throwing you into the chaos of actual combat in the second half.
Exactly. It's a really powerful examination of how soldiers are made and what war does to them.
And then his final film, released just after he died in 1999, Eyes Wide Shut. Still feels quite mysterious.
It does. A very different kind of film again. A psychosexual dreamscape almost, with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, who were a real-life couple then.
Which added another layer to it.
For sure. It delves into desire, jealousy, secrets within a marriage, the hidden worlds beneath the surface of society. There's so many theories about what it all means.
And his death happening right after he finished editing just adds to that aura of mystery around it, doesn't it?
It really does. It feels like a final, enigmatic statement.
So Kubrick passed away in '99, but his shadow looms large over filmmaking today, wouldn't you say? You see his influence everywhere.
Oh, undeniably. His whole approach, the meticulousness, the visual precision, the willingness to tackle huge, complex ideas, pushing technological boundaries.
It's a blueprint for ambitious filmmaking.
Absolutely. You look at directors today like Christopher Nolan or Denis Villeneuve.
You can definitely see the Kubrick DNA there.
For sure. They've absorbed those lessons about scale, about atmosphere, about intellectual rigor in genre filmmaking. He set a very high bar.
And some of his films feel weirdly predictive looking back. 2001.
It's uncanny, right? Made in the late 60s. And it basically shows us video calls, tablets that look like iPads, sentient AI, the complexities of long-term space travel.
It's startlingly prescient. And maybe A Clockwork Orange, too, in a darker way?
You could argue that. It's exploration of youth violence, societal decay, and the media's role. Maybe it foreshadowed some aspects of desensitization we see today.
And we have to talk about the perfectionism again. It's legendary. The endless takes, the sets.
The research. Remember the stories about his unmade Napoleon film? Apparently he read hundreds, maybe 500 books for it, created this massive card catalog system.
Just incredible dedication. or obsession, depending on how you look at it.
Exactly. It fueled this reputation he had for being difficult, demanding, controlling on set.
Which brings up that question. Could we have gotten these masterpieces without that side of him? Without that absolute, maybe ruthless dedication to his vision?
It's hard to say, isn't it? Maybe that intensity was part of the package, inseparable from the genius.
So wrapping this up, we come back to where we started. Genius. Madman. Something else.
I think you have to say genius, ultimately, but a complex one. Maybe the madman label comes from that uncompromising drive, that singularity of vision.
Whatever you call it, his impact is just undeniable. He changed what cinema could be.
Absolutely. His films don't just entertain, they provoke, they challenge, they stick with you, they reward rewatching because there's always more to unpack. He's undoubtedly one of the true masters.
So if you're listening and you haven't dived into Kubrick, or maybe it's been a while.
Oh, definitely seek them out. Or revisit them. You'll find new things. Guaranteed.
For sure. And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Thinking about Kubrick's intense focus, his demand for total control over his art. How much of that creative control do you think is actually necessary for real innovation, for truly groundbreaking work? Not just in film, but anywhere.
That's a really interesting question to ponder. Where's that line between necessary control and maybe going too far? Something to think about.